Hello, I'm Jeff Groves,
And I'm Ann Loader.
and welcome to this month's edition of Police Beat. You know, Ann, sometimes a lot of people don't have the chance to take time out of their daily lives and come down and ride with the police, and that is an opportunity that is available to everyone in Fort Collins. So what we thought we'd do for this month's show is we'd actually take you out on a Friday and Saturday night in Fort Collins and let you see what happens in the daily routine of a patrol officer.
You may wonder what a typical day in the life of a Fort Collins police officer is like. Well, first of all, we work 4 10-hour shifts as our normal week. We come here to the Fort Collins Police Department to check in for shift at 300 LaPorte Avenue. Once we have our shift meeting with our lieutenant and sergeants where we learn about any wanted people or stolen vehicles we're supposed to be looking for, any big incidences that had just occurred in the city, we then check into our areas that we're assigned to by our sergeants and go out alone in our patrol cars. The calls that we get come in different ways. One of the first ways they come in is when you call 221-6540 to the general police number. Our police records division handles a lot of our calls where they take a lot of reports over the phone that saves officers from being tied up on not so important or not so intense safety-wise calls. And they do a lot of our work for us, plus they're always working on updating the files and entering all sorts of information from our reports. If they cannot handle the call, they forward the call up to dispatch. Otherwise, your 911 calls end up right in dispatch. So let's go up to dispatch now where we can see what they're doing. Here we are in dispatch where several dispatchers work at one time. One's taking care of police calls, another one's taking care of ambulance and fire calls, and the others are taking calls coming in from the public, whether they be 911 or through our regular police number. They have quite a computer setup now where they can show what kind of calls are holding, what all the engines are doing for the firefighters or what all the police officers are doing and what kind of calls are holding, how many officers are on scene. It's usually very quiet up here when we come up here because they need to be listening very intensely to every call that they get. And they're all automatically always entering people, seeing if they're wanted when we call them out, to clear them. Also on their traffic stops, they run their plates in case it's a stolen vehicle or whatever. So the dispatching job is very stressful. We rely on them to give us all the calls and all the information we need to respond properly. Another way our lieutenant and sergeants can tell what the officers are doing, what kind of calls they're holding, they have a computer screen in their office which shows the city divided up in P1 through P5, which are the areas of the city. P8 is a floating area. PG is the gang unit. PI is the DUI unit, and then our sergeants and lieutenants. It also shows what kind of waiting incidences we have and where all the officers are, what kind of calls they're on, you know, what if they're active or if they're available, if they're not available. And that's another way everybody knows what everybody else is doing on the street. And sometimes you may wonder, why can't we get there for a call right away if it's not urgent and due to safety or danger? A lot of times we have calls stacked that may be 10 holding versus 1 holding or none holding. It just depends what day, what night, what time of day, and how many officers are working. Before we go out in the street to check out the calls and see what the officers are doing on their general night, let's go see Lieutenant Gary Perman, who's been here for over 27 years, and ask him a few questions. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Ann.
Say, for Police Beat, I thought it'd be interesting for the public to know, for one thing, you've been here over 27 years. What's some of the major differences you've seen from when you first started here as a police officer to what it's like today out on the streets?
Well, I think probably the most significant impact is the population growth. When I started here in 1968, the population, not counting the college, was probably 35 or 40,000 people, and now we're well over 100,000. The call load and the types of calls has grown significantly as the population has increased. We deal now with a lot more serious calls and probably a lot more of the serious calls than we ever have in the past. As you well know, it's not unusual for 2 or 3 times during the course of an evening, particularly on the weekends, to have a call involving dangerous weapons or deadly weapons, shots fired, that kind of thing. And in 1968, that was just not done. It was, those kind of calls maybe happened once a month or every other month or something like that. The other thing is the sheer magnitude of calls. We're dealing with maybe 100 or 120 requests for service during a 10-hour shift on a weekend now. When I started 27 years ago, a whole street platoon of police officers consisted of about 6 people, and maybe over the course of an 8-hour shift we might each handle 1 or 2 calls. So
Wow.
you can see that there's a tremendous increase in the calls for service.
What's the average number of officers that work like on a Friday, Saturday night on a swing shift compared to what it used to be? What's the minimum requirement that we look for on the street?
Well, our minimum now on swing shift, which is the 4:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. shift, is 10 officers on Friday night and 9 officers on Saturday night.
And that still doesn't cover all the calls.
Oh, no, no. That's based on some demographics as far as past history is concerned. And of course, past history can help you project what might happen, but there are always those aberrations as far as the call load to where 20 officers probably couldn't keep up on a particular Friday night, just depending on the circumstances.
That's right. And you as a lieutenant and our sergeants even help us respond to calls and stuff when they start getting real busy out there. So
Well, we all wear the same uniform.
We sure
so
do.
When it comes down to it, if we have to handle calls, that's the way it works.
right. Okay, well thanks, Gary.
You bet.
Well, let's go out and check out what the officers are doing on the street on a Friday night and see what kind of action's going on in Fort Collins. We're going through Old Town right now, and we've got diversion being set up, which they do every Friday and Saturday night for a certain amount of hours, and that's to keep the traffic down to a minimum through Old Town for the safety of all the vehicles that go through as well as all the pedestrian traffic. I see here's one of our officers in a traffic stop up here right now. I'll assist myself on scene on the computer and go back him up. As an officer drives around on their patrol in their certain area they're assigned to, when you don't have a call, you're dispatched to or currently following up on or doing any type of investigation. We drive around and we're looking for any type of traffic violations such as speeding or not stopping at a stop sign. We're always looking at license plates, see if they're expired, if it happens to be a stolen vehicle. We have all these types of avenues we can look up in our computers to tell us different things of who the vehicle is registered to, if the tag on the plate is correct or not. A lot of people sometimes tend to put different stickers on different plates. So we're always looking around, we're always watching all the businesses as we drive along, see if we notice anything suspicious or if a door is wide open and it's dark inside. A lot of times we'll get out on foot and go shake some doors and make sure they're locked. If we find something unlocked, we call for backup and call a representative of that certain business. We check the building, make sure it's secure or that no one's inside. A lot of times we run upon a motorist assist when somebody's vehicle's broken down. All sorts of things we're looking for when we're just driving around.
Well, at this point you might say that we're on the hunt. What I'm actually assigned to do tonight is to work as an additional DUI officer. And at the moment, I'm trying to find a DUI the best I can. One of the ways to do that is to actually run radar or laser in a specific area and make contact with as many drivers as you possibly can in an effort to find the DUIs that are actually out there driving around. In this case, we also have a second reason for pulling this car over, and that's the fact that he's got a headlight out. Edward 18 traffic.
Edward 18.
Lincoln 1 Union 9834 will be at Elizabeth and Shields.
16, I'm in Vining College. I'll run up and take a look at that.
What we came upon in our travels tonight was one of the community service officers had contact with some of the people down here in 200 block of North College, and when she ran a routine license check, she found out that the driver is under suspension. So at this point in time, she's investigating further and seeing whether any tickets are warranted in this case. One of the things you'll notice is that the officers who work the night shift tend to cover each other extensively. What we're doing right now is pulling up here on the DUI officer, and we're going to just make sure that his contact with this car goes okay. You'll notice that we actually shut off our headlights before we pulled up behind him so that we didn't illuminate the officer as he was up there talking to the driver of the car.
Okay, I know this wasn't your regular edition of cops on the street on the other cable channels, but we hope what Jeff and I showed you going around on patrol gave you an idea of what, Fort Collins police officers go through every day and night, and that every day is different than any other day, and there's never a dull moment.
That's true, man. As a final note, I'd like to remind you that the City Council recently enacted an ordinance that allowed speed enforcement by camera to come into Fort Collins. In conjunction with American Traffic Systems, we're beginning a public education campaign here in Fort Collins that will continue through the month of June and into July. If you or your service group or public work group or neighborhood group are interested in having a demonstration and explanation of camera radar before it officially comes online, you can call Rita Davis, the project coordinator, at 221-6550, and she'll get you scheduled for that demonstration. Thank you for watching.
And join us again on next month's edition of Police Beat.